Good morning, everyone. Hope you all are enjoying your vacation. Today's lecture topic is on exchange of gases. So, what is basically exchange of gases? When you take air in, it goes to your alveoli. From alveoli, it goes to your pulmonary circulation. Mainly the oxygen goes there. Simultaneously, carbon dioxide in the pulmonary circulation diffuse, so comes to the alveoli and expired out. So that is the basically the gas exchange or exchange of gases. So there are things called respiratory quotient. So that is a ratio between the amount of carbon dioxide released and the amount of oxygen is utilized for particular substrate metabolism. So in simple term, it says respiratory quotient, volume of carbon dioxide released divided by volume of oxygen absorbed. So there are different respiratory quotient for different substrate. For anaerobic, it is 0. In a mixture of substrate, usually what we consume for our meal, the RQ or respiratory quotient is 0.8. Alveolar and blood gas partial pressure. So the Dalton's law of partial pressure is if you take the content of gases, particular one gas partial pressure is equal to the total pressure multiplied by the fraction of that gas. If you take the oxygen in the air, the total pressure in the environment, the 1 atmospheric pressure is 760 millimeter mercury. The percentage of oxygen in environmental air is 21%. That means 0.21. So, partial pressure of oxygen is 760 into 0.21, 160 millimeter mercury. But when you take air in, there is water in the trachea. So, the air gets humidified. So, the partial pressure of total air is 760 subtract by 47 millimeter mercury, that is vapor pressure exerted by water. So the partial pressure of oxygen in trachea is 150 millimeter mercury. So there are amount of air in inspiratory air, alveoli and expiratory air. Oxygen in inspired air, it is 158 millimeter mercury. In the alveoli, its partial pressure is 100. In the expired air, it is 116. That increase in expired air compared to alveoli is due to the dead space. Because with the expired gas, alveoli air aggregate with dead space. And you have to remember the partial pressure of carbon dioxide and oxygen in inspired air, alveoli and expired air. Approximately 2% of the systemic cardiac output bypasses the pulmonary circulation. We call that physiological shunt that happens normally. What is the problem in bypassing the pulmonary circulation? Because in the veins, the blood is deoxygenated. When they go through the pulmonary vein, they exchange with the oxygen from the alveoli. So they become oxygenated blood. When a portion of blood is not traversing or traveling through pulmonary circulation, it is still deoxygenated blood. When that deoxygenated small portion of blood, that is shunted blood, is come and join with the oxygenated blood, the partial pressure of oxygen is little reduced because already oxygenated blood is mixed with deoxygenated blood. So that's what they are saying. The resulting admixture of venous blood with oxygenated arterial blood makes the partial pressure of oxygen of arterial blood slightly lower than that of alveolar air. So the inspired air, oxygen is, the partial pressure of oxygen is 158. In alveoli, that is 100. But after the diffusion, in the arteries, it is 95 because of the shunted portion of the blood. So this oxygenated blood combined with the deoxygenated blood, and in the artery, the pressure of the oxygen is 95. If there is no physiological shunt and the diffusion is perfect, you are expecting partial pressure of oxygen in the artery as similar to the partial pressure of oxygen in the alveoli. So this is oxygen cascade. In the air, oxygen pressure is 150, and in the alveoli, it is around 100. And when there is a diffusion occurs, not all the gases get diffused. So there is a slight reduction in the partial pressure of oxygen in the capillary. And again, there is a shunted blood comes and joins. So in the arteries, it's further little reduced. So that's a kind of step down. And in the tissue, it is further low because of the oxygen utilization. So that is what we call oxygen cascade. Exchange of gases in the lung is mainly take place across the alveolar capillary membrane. Is a diffusion. So diffusion is where you have a high molecular or high concentration of air goes to the low concentration place. And usually carbon dioxide diffuse from pulmonary circulation into alveoli and expire. Oxygen comes from environment to the alveoli and diffuse to the pulmonary circulation. So this is what is this. This is your pulmonary circulation, alveoli, oxygen comes in, carbon dioxide goes out or wash out from your system. So simple diffusion is passive, no energy needed. The diffusion of gases obeys gas laws. The gas laws, Dalton's law and Boyle's law, you learn in your A-level chemistry. Dalton's law said in a mixture of non-reacting gases, the total pressure exerted is equal to the sum of the partial pressures of the individual gases. Boyle's law says at constant temperature, the volume of gas is inversely proportional to the pressure of that gas. Graham's law states the rate of diffusion is inversely proportional to the square root of its molecular weight. So whenever a gas's molecular weight is increases, the rate of diffusion is reduces. Whenever the molecular weight is reduces, the rate of diffusion of particular gas is increases. Determinant of gas diffusion. There are three determinants. One is the characteristics of gas, the solubility and molecular weight, the pressure gradient, the pressure different across the alveolar capillary membrane, and the membrane characteristics, the surface area and thickness. From these above determinant, fix find there's a relationship between the transfer of gases through the sheet of tissue. The rate of transfer is proportional to the surface area and to the gas tension difference, and again proportional to the diffusion coefficient, and it inversely proportional to the tissue thickness. So if you put that in the equation, the volume of gas transfer proportional to the surface area into diffusion coefficient, pressure gradient divided by thickness. Instead of diffusion coefficient, we can use this equation and we put and form an equation like this. So the volume of gas is proportional to the surface area, solubility and pressure gradient across the alveolar capillary membrane. And the volume of gas is inversely proportional to the thickness of the alveolar capillary membrane and molecular weight. That means whenever there is an increase in the thickness, you see the thickness of the alveolar capillary membrane, or increase the molecular weight of the particular gases which is going to pass through, the rate of diffusion is reduced. When there is an increase in the surface area, and the increase in the solubility, and there is an increase in the pressure gradient across the alveolar capillary membrane, the volume of gas transfer is increased. Like that, when there is a reduction of the thickness, the rate of transfer is increased. You should be able to work out how the rate of transfer across the capillary membrane varies, depends on each determinant when they are increasing and when they are decreasing. Because we are going to assess that in your exam. The characteristics of gas solubility that we have seen, the solubility is proportional to the diffusion coefficient into square root of molecular weight. Carbon dioxide diffuses 20 times more rapidly than the oxygen. If you take human lung and your alveolar capillary membrane, it is very thin and it has a very large surface area. So these are the two major characteristic features which facilitate the rate of transfer of gases across alveolar capillary membrane. There are other factors also contribute to the respiratory gas exchange, like the properties of the circulation, hemoglobin level, and whether that particular gas is perfusion limited or diffusion limited. So the homework for you all is, sorry, you have to go and read about perfusion limited exchange and diffusion limited exchange, an example for so. If you take the cross section of the alveolus and your pulmonary capillary or pulmonary blood vessel, these blue color one are deoxygenated, these are oxygenated. If you take 20 millimeter of nitrous oxide and carbon dioxide, they have very good diffusion properties. So they quickly exchange across the alveolar capillary membrane at the 1/3 of the distance of the capillary. That means in the alveolar capillary membrane, when there is a gas diffusion occurs, pulmonary blood vessel passes RBC through the vessel to get exchange of the gases. Usually, one particular exchange will take, or the blood vessel stay inside the pulmonary vessel for 0.8 second or 0.75 seconds. So that to reach the full distance. But for the carbon dioxide and nitrous oxide and oxygen in the normal condition, they are gets exchanged or saturated before or by the 1/3 of the distance which your red blood cell supposed to travel. So if you want to increase more exchange, what you have to do is you have to increase the perfusion or the amount of blood. So when there is more gases, they will come and join. So that is perfusion limited. But for the carbon dioxide, its diffusion properties are matter. It is difficult to get diffused. So even though in an abnormal situation like fibrosis, the oxygen cannot diffuse because of the thickness of the alveolar capillary membrane. So when there's a diffusion property is difficult, even though you have enough blood, even though you increase your blood supply, you won't exchange more gases. So that is diffusion limited. So that is the basic difference between what is perfusion limited, what is diffusion limited. I'm going to play a video. Just listen for that.
Welcome to USMLEFasttrack.com, the stage for the USMLE Step 1 2013 edition. Page 549. All right, now we're going to move on to the concept of perfusion limited and diffusion limited. Now, looking at the picture on your screen here, you see the picture of an alveolus. You also see a picture of capillaries, which is divided into start, middle, and the end of the capillary. And it's also colored differently. The blue color indicates that this is the deoxygenated blood. The red color indicates it's the oxygenated blood. So deoxygenated blood is what comes in and it goes out once it gets oxygenated as the oxygenated blood. Now looking at the perfusion limited, you see that oxygen, carbon dioxide, and nitrous oxide all in normal situation is perfusion limited. Now what this means is that let's say you have 20 mmHg of oxygen. That complete 20 mmHg of oxygen is going to make its way to the capillary. It's going to oxygenate all that deoxygenated blood and sends it out. So in that duration, in that whole length of the pulmonary capillary, that oxygen is going to make its way to the capillary and it's going to, oxygenate all that blood that's coming in. So this is perfusion limited. So in this, there is that gas equilibrium that occurs early along the length of the capillary. That is what you see here in the picture of perfusion limited. So looking at this concept, you could tell that the only way you could have more oxygen going into the capillary is if there is an increase in the blood flow. So if there is more capillary blood flow, there's going to be more oxygen that's going to make its way to the capillary and eventually leading to more oxygen being supplied to the body. Now, the second thing we're going to talk about is the diffusion limited. Now, diffusion limited is an abnormal condition that occurs with conditions such as emphysema and fibrosis. So think about a capillary with fibrosis. Now, because the wall of the capillary was going to be thickened, it's not going to be easy for that oxygen to simply diffuse through. So therefore, the equilibrium does not occur. So if you look at the picture here, you see that if there is 20 mmHg of oxygen, only 10 mmHg of oxygen is actually going to make it through. So in this case, there's not going to be an equilibrium by the time blood reaches the end of the capillary. What is the equation of diffusion? The equation of diffusion is the area.
Yeah, that's all about the video. I hope you understood that. And go through this picture. The carbon monoxide is diffusion limited. So what happened is, even though the blood crosses the capillary 0.75 seconds took, it cannot come to a equilibrium with the gas in the alveoli. So the pressure is still low. But for the nitrous oxide and oxygen, it is very quick. The equilibrium attained at 1/3 of the length of the capillary. Okay. Just go through these pictures and you will get an idea with my explanation. And this is again a diffusion limited and perfusion limited. Try to know the values. And this I just make your life easier. I gave you a easy chart, so you can go through that later and make sure it's a homework. You have to go through the book and get an idea. So this is just what happens to the carbon dioxide and oxygen in the dead space and alveoli and the pure alveoli. So diffusing capacity is defined as the volume of gas that diffuses through the membrane per 1 minute when the partial pressure difference of that gas is 1 millimeter mercury. The partial difference across alveolar capillary membrane. So the diffusion capacity is volume divided by the partial pressure difference. So the diffusion capacity for carbon dioxide is at least 20 times more than that of oxygen. The factors affecting the diffusing capacity. So the ventilation, perfusion, hemoglobin level, surface area, thickness of the membrane, all affect it. And the reduced diffusing capacity is seen in emphysema because there's a disruption of the alveoli, so decreased surface area. And pulmonary fibrosis and pulmonary edema. In these both, there's an increased diffusion distance. There's an increased diffusion distance of the gases in pulmonary fibrosis and pulmonary edema. So gas exchanges reduce, diffusing capacity is reduced. So my extraction is, my little one is running between me. Okay. So increased diffusing capacity is seen in exercise, supine position, polycythemia, left to right shunt, pulmonary hemorrhage, and during asthma. So these can be asked in MCQs. The next important topic is ventilation perfusion ratio. This is a separate lecture for you, will be conducted by one of our lecturers. But it is a very, students think it's very difficult to understand. No, it is one of the very easiest concept in physiology as far as I concern. Ventilation perfusion ratio, whenever you hear the term, what comes to your mind is ventilation is air, perfusion is blood. So you are going to look at what is the ratio between the amount of air and the amount of blood on that particular part of the lung. That's it. So the ventilation occurs through the alveoli. Perfusion occurs through the blood vessels. So here ventilation happens, perfusion goes, exchange happens, and the amount of ventilation divided by amount of perfusion 0.8. But due to the pulmonary embolism or shock, if the blood flow is stopped, there will be no blood supply to that particular alveoli. So there is the ventilation in the alveoli, but no perfusion. So ventilation is there, perfusion is 0. So any digit divided by 0 is infinity. So infinity. So high VQ ratio because ventilation is high. Here, because of the air obstruction in this picture, you may not get the proper ventilation. So ventilation is 0. perfusion is there. So the VQ is low and ventilation is 0. 0 divided by any digit, that is 0. These are grade 5 mathematics I am teaching to you. So this is the alveolar level. This is the venous level. Now the VQ. The partial pressure of alveolar gases are oxygen 100, carbon dioxide 40, and these determined by the rate of alveolar ventilation and the rate of diffusion. And remember, very important thing, all alveoli are not equally ventilated, and not all alveoli are equally get blood or perfused. All alveoli are not ventilated equally, and all alveoli are not perfused equally. Alveolar ventilation is, that means, so we'll take what is pulmonary ventilation. Pulmonary ventilation is tidal volume into respiratory rate. By now you should know what is normal tidal volume and normal respiratory rate. So the pulmonary ventilation is 6 liters per minute. But you are having a dead space. Only the air reaching your alveoli is 350 milliliter. So the alveolar ventilation is 350 into 12, 4.2 liter per minute. Your cardiac output is approximately 5 liter. So in a normal lung, the VQ ratio is ventilation 4.2, perfusion 5. So 4.2 divided by 5, that is 0.8. If you take the alveoli or the lungs in the upright position, and if you take 3 alveoli in the upper part, the apex, one is the lower part, the base, and the middle part. So just imagine if you are having one bag, so I am holding one bag of gas on my left hand and one bag of water on my right hand. For this hand is water, for this is blood, this is air. If I drop these both bags, which is go down faster, the blood, because of high density. Gas has low density, so it can go higher or stay higher comparative to blood. Understand that. Okay. So here, because of the gravity, less blood, but because of the low density of the air, more air. Here, more blood, less air. So now can you work out what is the ventilation perfusion at this alveoli, at the apex, and what is the VQ at this alveoli at the base? So there are regional differences in ventilation perfusion ratio. In the upright position, in the start of the inspiration, the intrapleural pressure is more negative at the apex of the lung. That is minus 10 centimeter. Then at the base, that is minus 2.5 centimeter water. Therefore, the transpulmonary pressure difference is higher at the apex. Because the transpulmonary pressure difference is higher at the apex, the alveoli in the apex are already dilated. The alveoli in the base are less dilated because of the less transpulmonary pressure compared to the apex. So, further, if we are going to increase your pressure in the apex of the lung, already it is distended. So it is very difficult to distend further. But in the base, it is small. So when you increase the pressure, it can distend or expand. Therefore, ventilation during inspiration is less at the apex than at the base. So because of the increased intrapleural pressure, that means more negative intrapleural pressure, increased transpulmonary pressure. So the apex, the alveoli are more expanded compared to the base. You see, the base, the alveoli are less expanded. Here, more expanded. So when there is more expanded, imagine there is already full-blown balloon. Can you increase the size further blowing again? It is difficult. But there is partially blown balloon, so it will easy to expand the balloon via blowing. That same principle apply here. Already expanded alveoli because of the increased negative pressure, it's again difficult to expand that further. But the base less expand, when increased pressure, it will expand further. So at the apex, intrapleural pressure is more negative, so greater transpleural pressure, large alveoli. So low intravascular pressure, less blood flow. So less ventilation perfusion. You got my idea? So can you work out how you are going to tell about the pressure, alveoli, blood flow to the base? Can you work it out? Like what happened in apex, can you say what will happen in the base? You have to work it out. Okay? If you work it out and find it, then you won't forget it. If you go towards the base of the lung, there's a compression of the blood vessels by alveolar pressure is reduced. So there is a increase in the blood flow because the gas is less density. It always tend to go upward towards the apex. So towards the base, there's a low amount of air. So the compression by the air on the blood vessel is reduced. So the more blood goes through the blood vessel. So the pulmonary blood flow is increased. Very simple, isn't it? O-level student stuff. So in the exercise, the VQ mismatch is changed because of increased cardiac output, and there's more capillaries formed, capillaries are dilated, so increased pulmonary blood flow. So I think you are having a different lecture for pulmonary circulation. You will learn that in detail. And with that, we come to the end of the lecture. I hope you all understood because all of you are my very brilliant students. If you have any doubt, you can contact me via WhatsApp or email. And I always say, peace be upon you, all of you. Thank you very much.